The storm finally began to ease. The wind softened, the rain slowed to a steady drizzle, and the deep rumble of thunder became more distant, like an angry voice fading into memory. Inside the small diner, the warm glow of the lights and the quiet hum of the coffee machine created a sense of calm, as though this place was untouched by the chaos that had passed outside. Keanu sat quietly at the corner booth, Emma curled beside him, her head resting gently on his arm. She had fallen asleep at last, her breathing soft and peaceful. After so much fear, she was finally safe enough to close her eyes. The diner woman moved quietly behind the counter, wiping surfaces not because they were dirty, but because her hands needed something to do while she processed everything that had happened. There was peace here now. But Keanu's mind remained full. He gazed out through the fogged window, the glass reflecting his thoughtful expression. The street beyond was empty again, slick with rain, washed clean by the storm. Shadows no longer lurked in the corners. Danger seemed far away, but Keanu knew there was more to this story than what had happened tonight. The door opened gently, the bell above ringing softly. An old man stepped inside, his presence calm and quiet. His hair was silver, his clothes simple, and there was something familiar about him, though neither Keanu nor the diner woman could immediately say why. The old man smiled kindly and walked slowly to their table. He did not speak right away. Instead, he placed a hand on the back of the chair opposite Keanu and asked softly, "May I sit?" Keanu nodded. The old man lowered himself into the chair carefully, as though every movement carried weight. He looked at Emma, sleeping peacefully, then at Keanu with eyes that seemed to see far beyond the moment. "You did well tonight," the old man said. Keanu studied him carefully. "Do we know each other?" he asked gently. The old man smiled faintly. "Not in the way you think," he replied. "But I have known of you for a long time. And I have known of this child." Keanu's expression softened, but curiosity flickered in his gaze. "Emma's mother trusted me," the old man continued. "She was part of something dangerous. When she realized she could not protect her daughter any longer, she asked me to watch from a distance until the right person could help her." He paused, his eyes warm but sad. "That person was you." Keanu sat back slowly, absorbing the words. "Me?" he asked quietly. The old man nodded. "You have a gift," he said. "Not fame, not strength, but something rarer. You walk through this world quietly, yet you leave places better than you found them. You stay humble, you stay kind." He gestured gently toward the diner woman behind the counter, who watched with quiet understanding. "You gave hope where hope was fading," the old man continued. "You offered respect when others showed none. You chose patience when others would have chosen anger." His voice softened further. "That is why Emma is safe tonight." Keanu lowered his gaze, feeling a quiet humility settle over him. He hadn't done this for recognition or thanks. He had simply followed what felt right, moment by moment, choice by choice. "What happens now?" he asked softly. The old man smiled gently. "Emma has a place to go," he said. "People who will care for her, people who will protect her." Emma stirred slightly in her sleep, but did not wake. She seemed to sense that whatever burden she had carried was no longer hers alone. Keanu felt both relief and sadness. "Will she remember this night?" he asked. The old man nodded. "Yes," he said, "but not just the fear. She will remember that someone stayed with her, someone who listened, someone who showed kindness." Outside, the last drops of rain tapped softly against the window. The sky was beginning to lighten just a little, the darkness giving way to the soft promise of dawn. Keanu gently lifted Emma into his arms. She barely stirred, still deep in sleep, her small body warm against his chest. The old man stood slowly. "I will take her from here," he said kindly. "You've done enough." Keanu looked at him and then at Emma one last time. "Be safe, little one," he whispered. He placed her gently into the old man's arms. And in that simple act, it felt as though a weight lifted, not just from Emma, but from Keanu himself. The old man gave him a grateful nod, then turned toward the door. The bell rang softly as he stepped out into the quiet street. The morning light beginning to touch the edges of the sky. Keanu sat back down at the booth, his hands resting on the table. The diner woman came over and sat opposite him without a word. There was nothing more to say. The storm was over. Outside, the streets would soon come alive again. People would return to their routines, unaware of what had happened here during the long dark night. But inside this little diner, something important had taken place. A reminder that kindness is not loud, that strength is not force, that respect can change the path of a single life. Keanu finished his coffee slowly, savoring its warmth. Then he stood, nodded once more to the diner woman, and quietly walked out the door. As he stepped into the cool morning air, he felt a deep sense of peace. Journey was over, but kindness would always continue. Ending line. Keanu picked her up carefully, holding her close to shield her from the cold and from fear. Then he walked faster, his steps steady, never running but never slowing down either. The figures behind them followed, their footsteps splashing in the puddles, closing the distance slowly but surely. The light from the diner appeared ahead, a warm glow that felt like a promise. Keanu quickened his pace, the storm raging around them, wind and rain lashing at their faces. When they reached the door, Keanu pushed it open with his shoulder, the bell above ringing softly. The woman behind the counter looked up in surprise, the same woman he had met earlier, and her face changed quickly from surprise to understanding. Without a word, she rushed forward and locked the door behind them, pulling the curtains shut so that the darkness outside stayed outside. Inside, it was warm and safe. The girl clung tightly to Keanu, burying her face into his shoulder. The woman behind the counter brought a thick towel and wrapped it around the child gently. Then she placed a steaming cup of hot cocoa on the table. Keanu sat with the girl still in his arms, letting her breathing slow, her small body warming gradually. For a long time, none of them spoke. Outside, the storm howled and the shadows passed the window, but inside there was only calm. Keanu looked at the woman and nodded once, a silent thank you. She nodded back, a quiet understanding passing between them. In that small diner, on a stormy night, a lost child found safety, an exhausted woman found purpose again, and a quiet man once again chose kindness over fear. The storm outside could rage as much as it wanted. Inside, there was warmth. Inside, there was peace. Ending line. The storm outside continued to roar, rain lashing against the windows and wind howling through the narrow streets. Inside the small diner, though, time seemed to slow down. It felt like the world had shrunk to this one warm place where three people, Keanu, the diner woman, and a lost child, sat together in quiet understanding. The little girl was finally breathing steadily again. Her small fingers clutched the warm towel around her shoulders, her eyes still wide but calmer now. She sat close to Keanu in the booth, as if afraid to let go of this safety she had found so suddenly. The woman behind the counter moved quietly, pouring fresh coffee for Keanu, placing a plate of toast on the table without a word. There was a quiet respect in the room, a recognition that words were not always needed, that presence itself was a kind of kindness. But beneath this peaceful surface, questions lingered. Who had been following the child? Why had she been left alone? And why did danger seem to still be watching from outside the fogged windows? Keanu felt it too, a tension in the air, something unresolved. He leaned forward gently, keeping his voice soft and kind. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked the child. She hesitated for a moment before whispering, "Emma." Keanu smiled gently. "Emma, that's a beautiful name." Emma's small hands wrapped around the warm mug of cocoa the diner woman had given her. She stared into its surface for a moment before speaking again, her voice barely above a whisper. "My mother, she left me," Emma said, her lip trembling. "But she told me something strange. She said to run if I ever saw a man with a scar across his face." Keanu felt a chill run through him. This detail was important. It was more than just abandonment. There was a reason for her fear, for the shadows that followed her. He glanced at the diner woman, who watched silently from behind the counter. There was something in her eyes too, a flicker of recognition, as if this story was touching a memory she hadn't shared yet. "Emma," Keanu said gently, "was there a man like that tonight? Is that why you were hiding?" Emma nodded quickly. "He was there, with other men. They were looking for me." Keanu's thoughts swirled. Why would strangers chase a little girl? What could she possibly know, or what secret could she possibly carry? But then, the door of the diner rattled sharply. All three of them froze. The lock held firm, the curtains drawn tight, but the sound was clear. Someone was outside. Keanu stood slowly, careful not to frighten Emma, and moved toward the window, staying just to the side so he couldn't be seen. He peeked out through a small gap in the curtain, and there, standing in the rain, was a man he hadn't expected to see again, one of the casino guards from earlier that night. His uniform was soaked through, and across his face was a long scar, thin and pale, cutting from his temple to his jaw. Keanu single quotes, S breath caught for a moment. This was not just coincidence. This was connected. He returned to the table and knelt beside Emma. "Emma," he said quietly, "was this the man you meant, the one with the scar?" Emma's eyes filled with fear as she nodded, burying her face into Keanu's side. The diner woman stepped forward finally, her voice low but strong. "His name is Mason," she said. "He used to work here years ago, before he became something else." Keanu turned to her, his expression soft but filled with curiosity. "You know him?" She nodded slowly. "He's dangerous. I didn't expect to see him again. Not here, not tonight." Outside, the storm thundered louder, lightning flashing briefly and illuminating the man's face. Cold, determined, patient. Keanu thought carefully. Running would not solve this. Hiding would only delay whatever this was. He gently pulled Emma close and looked her in the eye. "Emma," he said softly, "do you trust me?" Emma's small hand squeezed as tightly as she nodded. Keanu stood then and spoke calmly to the diner woman. "I'll talk to him," he said. "Alone?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Yes," Keanu said gently, "but please, keep Emma safe no matter what happens." The woman nodded, understanding the gravity of what he was asking. Keanu walked to the door, unlocked it carefully, and stepped outside into the storm. The rain hit his face hard, cold and relentless, but his posture remained steady. He walked forward slowly, until he was face to face with Mason. The scarred man didn't speak at first. His eyes were sharp, measuring, full of tension. Finally, Mason spoke. "You shouldn't get involved, Reeves," he said coldly. "This isn't your fight." Keanu's voice was calm but strong. "It became mine when I found her alone in the cold." Mason narrowed his eyes. "That child carries a secret. Something her mother stole from the wrong people. I'm just here to finish the job." Keanu felt his heart tighten. This was far deeper than he had imagined, but he didn't back away. Instead, he stepped closer, his voice lowering. "Do you really want to hurt a child?" Keanu asked gently. The rain fell harder, soaking them both, but Keanu's words felt like they cut through the storm. Mason hesitated. For a brief moment, something flickered in his expression. Doubt? Regret? It was hard to say. "You don't know what's at stake," Mason muttered. Keanu single quotes, so and softened even more. "But I know what matters. And right now, what matters is protecting her." The scarred man stood there, motionless for a long moment. Then, without a word, he turned and disappeared into the shadows of the storm. Keanu stayed standing there in the rain, watching the street for a while, making sure the danger was truly gone. Only when he was sure did he turn and walk back into the diner. Emma ran to him as soon as he stepped inside, wrapping her arms around his waist tightly. The diner woman exhaled deeply, relief flooding her face. Keanu knelt down and hugged Emma gently. "You're safe now," he whispered. "No one will hurt you tonight." The storm still raged outside, but inside the diner, there was warmth, peace, and quiet strength. Kindness had won again. Not by force, but by humility, respect, and resilience. Ending line. Keanu took a deep breath, feeling the weight of those words settle around them like the cold air. "How long have you been here?" he asked gently. The girl shrugged. "A long time," she whispered. The rain fell harder now, soaking through their clothes. Still Keanu did not move. "Are you hungry?" he asked. She nodded slowly. Keanu smiled gently. "There's a diner just back that way," he said. "Warm food. Maybe a hot drink too. Would you like to come with me?" The girl hesitated, her eyes searching his face, trying to decide whether she could trust this quiet man sitting beside her in the cold rain. But there was kindness in his eyes, and something about the way he spoke, soft, patient, gentle, made her feel safe enough to nod again. Slowly, she stood up, her small hand trembling as she brushed the dirt from her dress. Keanu stood too, then offered his hand, not forcing but simply offering. After a moment, she placed her tiny hand in his. As they began walking back toward the diner, the storm grew heavier. Thunder rumbled far above them, and lightning flashed briefly, lighting the empty streets in cold white light. But there was something else now, a new tension. The girl kept looking back over her shoulder, her eyes wide and fearful. Keanu noticed. "Is something wrong?" he asked gently. She swallowed hard and nodded. "They're coming," she whispered. Keanu felt a chill, and it wasn't just from the rain. "Who's coming?" he asked, kneeling slightly so they could talk face to face. The girl's lip trembled. "Bad people," she said softly. "They've been following me." Keanu looked down the street. At first, he saw nothing but shadows and rain. But then, far in the distance, he noticed movement. Figures stepping out of the alleyways, slowly moving toward them. He could feel the tension rise in the air. This was no longer just about helping a lost child. There was real danger now. He gently squeezed the girl's hand. "We'll be okay," he said calmly. "We just need to keep walking. Stay close to me." The girl nodded, clutching his hand tightly. Keanu quickened his pace, scanning the streets carefully. Every step felt heavier as the storm raged around them, wind and rain lashing at their faces. The figures behind them were moving faster now. Keanu's mind stayed clear. He remembered all the times in his life when he had faced hardship, fear, loss, and he knew that panic would solve nothing. He guided the girl through narrow streets, turning corners quickly, weaving between parked cars and darkened buildings. Kept speaking softly to her, his voice calm and steady. "We're almost there," he said. "Just a little further." The light from the diner appeared ahead, a warm glow against the cold darkness of the storm, but the figures behind them were close now. Too close. Keanu picked the girl up gently, cradling her carefully as he moved faster, rain soaking through his clothes, cold air biting at his skin. He didn't stop. He didn't slow down. He reached the diner's door and pushed it open with his shoulder, the bell above ringing out once more. The woman behind the counter looked up, her eyes widening as she saw Keanu, drenched and carrying a frightened child. Without a word, she rushed forward, locking the door behind them and drawing the curtains shut. The girl clung to Keanu tightly, her small body shaking with fear. But inside the diner, there was warmth, light, safety. The storm raged outside and the shadows moved past the window. But for now, they could not reach them. Keanu sat down in the booth nearest the window, the girl still in his arms. He spoke softly to her, calming her breathing, helping her feel safe. The woman behind the counter brought a towel and wrapped it gently around the girl's shoulders. Then she placed a cup of hot cocoa in front of them, steam rising gently from the surface. There was no noise for a while, just the sound of rain beating against the glass. Keanu looked at the woman and nodded. Once, a silent thank you. The woman nodded back, understanding without needing words. For a long moment, nothing else mattered. Just warmth, kindness, and the quiet bond shared between three people who had all felt lost at some point, and who now sat together, safe from the storm. Ending line. The wind had turned colder as Keanu walked the lonely streets, his jacket pulled close but not enough to stop the chill that crept through the night air. Each step felt slower now, his shoes tapping softly against the wet pavement. Above him, heavy clouds gathered like dark curtains, hiding the moon and stars that had earlier offered comfort. The sounds of the city seemed distant and quiet, as if the whole world was holding its breath. A sharp gust swept leaves and small scraps of paper across the ground. Then, through that wind, Keanu heard something that made him stop. A soft, trembling cry. The sound was fragile, almost lost in the wind, but unmistakable. The cry of a child. He turned slowly, scanning the dimly lit street. The cry came again, weaker this time, almost fading. Keanu's eyes followed the sound until they fell on a small figure crouched in a doorway just across the street. She looked no older than 6 or 7. Her clothes were too thin for the cold night, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees, her face hidden behind tangled hair and tear-streaked cheeks. Her shoulders shook with every quiet sob, as if she were trying to disappear into the shadows. Keanu walked toward her carefully, not rushing, not making sudden movements. When he reached her, he knelt slowly so that he was at her level, keeping a respectful distance. "Hi," he said gently, his voice almost a whisper against the wind. "Are you okay?" The girl didn't look up. She only shook her head, her face buried deeper into her arms. Keanu sat down beside her, not too close, letting the silence between them settle like a soft blanket. He didn't speak again right away. He knew that sometimes just being there mattered more than any words. Minutes passed quietly. Rain began to fall, light at first, cool drops that dotted the pavement and soaked into their clothes. Still Keanu stayed, his presence calm and patient. Finally, in a voice so soft he almost couldn't hear it, the girl spoke. "They left me," she whispered. Keanu single quotes his heart ached at those words. He leaned forward slightly, speaking just as gently. "Who left you?" he asked. "My mother," she said, her voice breaking. "She said she would come back, but she didn't." Her words hung in the air like fragile glass, sharp and heartbreaking. Keanu didn't interrupt. He let her speak. Let her tears fall. "How long have you been here?" he asked softly after a while. "A long time," she answered, though it was clear she no longer knew what long meant. The rain fell heavier now, making their clothes cling coldly too. Their skin. But neither moved. "Are you hungry?" Keanu asked. The girl nodded slowly, still not lifting her head. "There's a small diner just down this street," he said, his voice full of warmth. "They have hot food and drinks. Would you like to come with me?" The girl hesitated, her thin fingers gripping her knees tightly. Her eyes lifted just a little, meeting his gaze. What she saw there, the kindness, the patience, the quiet respect, made her nod again. Keanu stood slowly and held out his hand, not forcing but simply offering. After a long moment, she reached out, placing her small cold hand into his. Her fingers felt fragile and thin, but her grip tightened as soon as she touched him, as if she had been waiting for this moment of safety. Together, they began walking through the rain, the wind pushing harder now, the cold biting at their skin. Soon, Keanu noticed something else. The girl kept glancing back over her shoulder, her eyes wide and anxious. Keanu knelt down so they could speak face to face. "What is it?" he asked gently. "They're coming," she whispered. Keanu felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. "Who's coming?" he asked quietly. "Bad people," she said, her voice shaking. "They followed me before." Keanu looked back along the dark street. At first, there was nothing but shadows and falling rain. But then, he saw them. Figures, moving slowly at first, stepping from alleyways, their faces hidden by the night, but their shapes unmistakable. There was intent in the way they moved, quiet and dark and dangerous. Keanu felt his heart beat faster, but his face stayed calm. Panic would not help this child. Fear would not protect her. He squeezed her hand gently. "We're going to be okay," he said softly. She looked at him with tears in her eyes but nodded. "This is a shelter nearby," he said. "They help people who are ready to try again. Tell them I sent you." The man took the card as if it were something precious. His fingers trembled more now, but this time it wasn't from sadness. It was from something else, maybe hope. "Why are you doing this?" the man asked softly, his voice nearly breaking. Keanu looked up at the stars that peeked through the city's haze. "Because people helped me once when I needed it most," he said. The man lowered his head, holding the card tightly in his hand. No more words were needed. The silence between them felt full, almost peaceful. Keanu stood slowly, giving the man a gentle nod. "Take care of yourself," he said, and then, with slow, steady steps, he continued down the street, disappearing into the night. But before he turned the corner, he looked back once and saw the man still sitting there, staring at the card, with tears quietly falling down his face. As Keanu walked away, he felt the weight of the night lifting slightly. Yes, it had been a bad night. Yes, there had been unfairness, mistakes, and sadness. But there had also been kindness, both from strangers and from himself. And sometimes, that was enough to keep going. Ending line. The night had grown darker as Keanu walked further from the casino's bright lights. The streets became quieter. The shops closed, the distant sounds of the city soft and far away now. He felt the cool air brushing against his face, and he welcomed the stillness around him. Each step felt careful, as though the path itself mattered more than the destination. He stopped when he saw it, a small diner, old and worn, sitting at the corner of an empty street. Its large front window was lit softly from inside, but there were no customers. The sign above the door flickered gently, the neon letters missing a few bulbs. "Open," it said, but the atmosphere felt as if no one had walked inside for hours. Keanu stepped closer and peered through the glass. Inside, a woman sat alone behind the counter, her elbows resting on its surface, her head in her hands. Her brown hair was messy, strands falling across her face. She looked tired, not just physically tired, but a deeper kind of exhaustion, the kind that sits quietly inside someone's chest for a long time. Her diner was empty, yet she remained open, as if waiting for something or someone. There was a sadness in the way she sat, in the way her shoulders drooped slightly, and in how she stared at the floor without moving. Keanu gently pushed the door open, the bell above it ringing softly. She lifted her head quickly, her eyes widening, for a moment when she saw who had entered. But she said nothing. She only gave a small nod, as if too tired to offer more. "Are you still serving?" Keanu asked quietly. The woman forced a polite smile. "For you." "Yes," she said softly, her voice hoarse from not speaking much. Keanu chose a booth near the window and sat down. The diner was old but clean, the walls decorated with faded photos of people who had probably once made this place lively. But tonight, the air felt heavy, filled with silence and memories. The woman came over with a menu, but Keanu gently waved it away. "Just coffee," he said. "Only if it's not too much trouble." She nodded and walked back behind the counter. He could see her hands shaking slightly as she poured the coffee into a white ceramic mug. Then she hesitated, her fingers brushing the edge of the counter as if she was thinking deeply about something. When she returned, she placed the mug carefully in front of him and sat down at the table across from him, something unusual for someone working a diner shift, but Keanu didn't mind. He felt she needed this moment more than he did. "Slow night?" he asked gently. She laughed softly, but there was no joy in it. "Slow month," she replied. Keanu took a slow sip of his coffee, letting the warm liquid settle inside him. He didn't speak right away. He waited, giving her space. Finally, she sighed and spoke again. "I used to have regulars," she said. "Every morning, every night. People laughed here, shared stories. But they're all gone now. This place, it's dying." Her words came out slowly, as if they hurt to say aloud. Keanu listened carefully, his expression soft kind. He didn't offer empty words or quick solutions. He simply let her speak. "My father opened this diner 40 years ago," she continued, her fingers tracing a small crack on the tabletop. "He built everything with his own hands. This counter, these booths, even the bell above the door. I promised I would keep it alive for him, but maybe I can't." She looked down, ashamed of her own admission. Keanu leaned forward slightly. "It's not weakness to admit when you're tired," he said gently. "It's honesty." The woman closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in deeply, as if trying to hold back tears. Keanu placed his cup down carefully. "You kept this place open tonight," he said, "even when no one was here. That says something." She nodded slowly. "Hope," she whispered. "Or maybe just habit." Keanu smiled softly. "Maybe both." Then he did something unexpected. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small notebook, old, its cover worn and soft at the edges. He flipped through a few pages, then handed it to her. "I write thoughts in this," he said. "Stories, ideas, memories of kind people. Maybe your diner should be in here too." She took the notebook carefully, as if it were something precious. She opened it to a random page and saw neat, small handwriting. Moments captured in simple words. Kindness shared between strangers. Lessons learned in quiet places. "You carry this everywhere?" she asked softly. "Yes," Keanu replied. "Because even when things are hard, even when nights are quiet and empty, I like to remember that kindness exists. That people like you are out there, keeping places like this alive." She swallowed hard, her fingers trembling slightly as she handed the notebook back. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for stopping here tonight." Keanu nodded gently. "Thank you for being open," he said. The bell above the door rang again as he stood and quietly left the diner. He didn't rush. He didn't look back. But as he walked away, he could feel that something had shifted inside that small place. Behind him, the woman wiped her face with the corner of her apron. She stood a little taller now. And when a car passed by a few minutes later, she turned. The sign on her window, so that open, shone a little brighter. Keanu Reeves continued walking into the night, the city around him still quiet and dark. But inside that old diner, hope had returned. And sometimes, hope is enough to keep the lights on for one more night. Ending line. As Keanu walked away from the small diner, the wind began to rise. Leaves danced across the empty streets and the air grew colder. The glow of the streetlights flickered slightly, shadows stretching longer than before. Above him, the clouds gathered, heavy and dark, hiding the stars that had shone gently just hours earlier. There was a strange silence in the air, the kind that arrives just before a storm breaks. Keanu pulled his jacket tighter around himself, but kept walking. His mind was still reflecting on the woman in the diner, the sadness in her eyes and the quiet courage it took for her to keep the lights on night after night. But soon, he was pulled out of his thoughts by a faint sound, a child's sob. He stopped. The wind made it hard to hear, but he was certain the sound was there, soft and broken, carried on the breeze. He looked around carefully, his eyes scanning the shadows, the alleyways, the doorways of closed shops. Then he saw her, a small figure crouched beneath the shelter of a narrow doorway, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. Her clothes were too thin for the cold, her shoes scuffed and soaked. Her hair clung to her face as tears slid down her cheeks. Keanu approached slowly, not wanting to frighten her. When he got close enough, he knelt down so that he was eye level with her, keeping a respectful distance. "Hi," he said gently, his voice soft and calm. "Are you okay?" The girl looked up, her wide eyes filled with fear and sadness. She didn't answer at first. She only shook her head, burying her face deeper into her arms. Keanu didn't press her. He sat down slowly on the cold concrete, letting the silence fill the space between them. After a few moments, he spoke again, this time even more gently. "It's okay," he said. "I'm just sitting here with you. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to." The girl's shoulders shook as she cried quietly. Keanu stayed still, patient, his presence steady and calm. The first drops of rain began to fall, cold and sharp. They dotted the ground around them, darkening the concrete slowly. Finally, the girl spoke, her voice small and cracked. "They left me," she whispered. Keanu single quotes, his heart ached at the words, but he kept his voice steady. "Who left you?" He asked softly. "My mother," she replied, wiping her nose with the back of her sleeve. "She said she'd come back, but she didn't." The soft sound of jazz music drifted across the casino floor, mixing with the distant hum of spinning roulette wheels and the clatter of poker chips. Laughter and chatter filled the air, as waiters moved smoothly between tables carrying drinks. On shining silver trays, bright lights blinked across the ceiling, making the entire place feel alive and restless. In the middle of this chaos, standing quietly near a poker table, was a man almost everyone in the world would recognize. But tonight, he was just another guest blending into the crowd. Keanu Reeves wore a simple black jacket over a dark shirt, plain jeans, and shoes that showed signs of wear. There was nothing flashy about him. He didn't seek attention, didn't act like a star. His head was slightly bowed, his fingers lightly tapping the edge of the table as he watched the game. A soft smile on his lips. He was known for this: humility, kindness, a quiet presence that made people feel at ease. A few guests had already noticed him and whispered among themselves, but no one dared interrupt. There was a respect in the air, unspoken but strong. Then, something unexpected happened. From the far end of the casino, two security guards appeared, walking quickly and with purpose. Their uniforms were sharp, their expressions hard. Their radios crackled softly at their belts. They moved straight toward Keanu, their steps quick and heavy, their eyes locked on him. Without hesitation, one guard spoke firmly. "Sir, we need you to come with us right now." Keanu looked up calmly, confusion flickering briefly in his eyes. "May I ask why?" His voice was soft, polite, but carried a quiet strength that made people around him turn their heads. The guard didn't answer. Instead, he reached out and took Keanu by the arm, not gently, but firmly, with the kind of grip that suggested force rather than conversation. It was a moment that could have gone unnoticed, except that Keanu Reeves was not just anyone. Already, whispers were spreading among the guests closest to the scene. "Is that really Keanu Reeves?" Someone said softly. "Why are they grabbing him?" Another asked. Keanu didn't resist. His face remained calm, his body relaxed. But his eyes showed something deeper, not fear, not anger, but a quiet sadness that this was happening at all. He gently placed his hand on the guard's wrist. His fingers did not tighten. His touch was light, almost comforting. "Please," he said softly, "I believe there is some mistake here. Let's talk about it." But the guards didn't seem interested in listening. The other one joined in, grabbing his other arm. Their grip tightened. They began to lead him away from the table, toward the back exit. People nearby froze, their drinks forgotten, their games abandoned. What had started as an ordinary night was now filled with tension. Phones appeared in hands. A woman near the bar spoke loudly, breaking the growing silence. "Hey, what are you doing?" "That's Keanu Reeves. He hasn't done anything wrong." Her voice was like a spark dropped on dry grass. Around the room, others began to murmur, then speak louder. "He's a good man," said an older gentleman near the blackjack table. "He's always respectful," added a dealer, stepping back from his game. The atmosphere shifted, where moments before there had been noise and distraction. Now there was unity, a shared understanding that something unjust was unfolding right before their eyes. And Keanu, he remained calm, even graceful, in the middle of it all. As the guards continued pulling him, he looked back at the guests and, in a voice soft enough that it made people lean in to hear, he spoke. "I'm sorry for this disturbance," he said. "I didn't mean to interrupt your evening." It was this simple apology, offered in a moment where most would shout or struggle, that changed everything. The casino seemed to stop breathing. The machines continued flashing, but the noise felt muted, as if the walls themselves were waiting to see what would happen next. At that moment, a casino manager arrived, a tall man in a dark suit, his face pale and his eyes wide with panic. He rushed over, almost tripping in his haste. Sweat glistened on his forehead. "Mr. Reeves," he said quickly, bowing his head slightly, "I am so sorry. This is a terrible mistake." The guards froze. Their hands loosened, and Keanu gently stepped back from their grip. But instead of walking away, instead of expressing anger or demanding an explanation, Keanu turned to the guard who had held his arm the tightest. He reached out, placed a hand on the man's shoulder, and spoke with deep sincerity. "I hope your evening improves," he said. The guard, stunned, lowered his head. His lips trembled slightly as he replied, I apologize." "Sir," the woman who had first spoken smiled warmly. Slowly, softly, the room began to clap. It wasn't loud, it wasn't wild. It was respectful, a way for everyone present to acknowledge what they had just witnessed. Keanu nodded once more, offering the manager a forgiving smile, and then turned toward the exit. He didn't rush, didn't look back. He simply walked away, quiet and graceful, leaving behind a room that had been transformed by his example. Even after he disappeared from sight, the silence remained for a long time. People would remember that night for years. They would tell the story of how Keanu Reeves, a man treated unfairly, responded not with anger but with humility, patience, and respect. A man who chose kindness even when it wasn't offered to him first. And how that kindness froze an entire casino. Ending line. After the silence that had settled like a blanket over the casino, the world outside felt even quieter. The bright lights of the street seemed less harsh, and the night air felt cool and calm. Keanu Reeves stepped out through the glass doors without saying another word. Behind him, the casino was still hushed, guests unsure how to return to their games after what they had just witnessed. Keanu stood on the sidewalk for a moment, taking a deep breath. He could still feel the slight ache on his arm where the guards had held him too tightly, but he didn't focus on that. Instead, his thoughts drifted to the people inside, the woman who had spoken up, the guests who had shown support without hesitation, and even the guards who had, in the end, apologized. There was something beautiful about it all, he thought. How quickly strangers had chosen to stand together for what was right. How kindness could appear even in a place built for distractions and noise. He began walking down the street, his steps slow and thoughtful. Neon signs flickered around him. Taxis passed by, their drivers watching curiously but not stopping. He was alone now, but that had never bothered him. Keanu valued these quiet moments. They gave him space to reflect, but tonight felt different. As he walked, he noticed a man sitting on a bench near the corner of the street. The man's clothes were worn, his shoes falling apart at the seams. His face was hidden in his hands, and his shoulders shook as if he were crying. Next to him sat an old duffel bag, its zipper broken and frayed at the edges. Keanu hesitated for just a moment, then walked over. He didn't speak at first. He simply sat on the opposite end of the bench, leaving space between them but making it clear he was there. The man eventually lifted his head, revealing tired eyes and a face lined with hardship. "You don't need to sit here," the man said quietly, his voice rough with sadness. "I know what I look like." Keanu smiled gently, leaning forward a little. "Sometimes sitting is exactly what I need," he replied softly. The man seemed surprised. Most people avoided him, crossed the street to not meet his gaze. But here was this stranger, and not just any stranger, choosing to sit nearby. Without judgment, after a long pause, the man spoke again. "Bad night," he admitted, wiping at his face with a trembling hand. Keanu nodded slowly. "I've had one too," he said. "But nights pass, mornings come." There was silence for a moment, comfortable this time. The noise of the city felt distant here on this quiet street corner. "You're Keanu Reeves, aren't you?" the man finally asked, almost afraid of the answer. "Some people know me by that name," Keanu replied gently. "But tonight, I'm just a person sitting with another person." The man let out a tired laugh, a sound that seemed rusty from disuse. "Why are you out here?" he asked. Keanu's single quotes, his eyes softened. "I needed some air," he said truthfully, "and it seems maybe you did too." The man looked down at his hands. They were rough, calloused, and dirty. His fingers trembled slightly as he picked at the corner of the bench. "I lost everything," he whispered. "Job, family, home, everything. I sit here most nights and nobody notices." Keanu listened carefully, not interrupting, not rushing the man's words. "Tonight," the man continued, "I almost gave up. I thought maybe no one would even care if I disappeared." His voice cracked, and Keanu felt a heavy ache in his chest. He leaned forward, placing both elbows on his knees. "I care," he said simply. Those two words carried a quiet weight that seemed to land deeply in the man's heart. "You don't know me," the man said, shaking his head. "But I'm here." Keanu replied, "Sometimes that's enough." A passing taxi slowed for a moment, its driver recognizing Keanu's face. But Keanu didn't wave, didn't move. He kept his full attention on the man beside him. After a long pause, Keanu reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small card. He handed it to the man carefully.